So, back in June of 2025, the Middle East was absolutely rocked by this massive 12-day war. You had U.S. and Israeli forces hitting Iranian nuclear sites. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? Problem solved? But no. The strikes didn't end the threat. In fact, they kicked off something even scarier. A brand new ultimatum from Saudi Arabia. The gist? If Iran gets a bomb, we're getting one too. And that, right there, is the 2026 Middle East nuclear arms race. It's this incredible story of how trying to fix one problem, well, it just might have created a much, much bigger one.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It all kicked off in the summer of 25. On June 13, boom, Israel launches what they're calling preemptive strikes. They're thinking Iran was just way too close to getting a nuclear weapon. For 9 straight days, things just kept escalating. Then, on June 22nd, the United States officially jumps in, striking these key, hardened Iranian facilities. And just like that, the very next day, Iran hits back at a U.S. base in Qatar, and a ceasefire is called. The 12-day war was officially over. But let me tell you, the real fallout, that was just getting started.
So, right after the fighting stops, everyone's trying to figure out what just happened. And this report from the Institute for Science and International Security, well, it kind of nails the central contradiction. On the one hand, you could say the strikes worked. They absolutely hammered Iran's physical infrastructure. We're talking centrifuge programs, weaponization sites, all of it. But, and this is a huge but, the report points out that, quote, important remnants and knowledge remain. And that little word knowledge, well, that turns out to be the key to this whole new crisis.
And this brings us to the first really big takeaway here. The threat wasn't gone. Not at all. It just changed shape. See, you can bomb a building, but you can't bomb an idea. You can't just erase decades of scientific know-how. And the world was about to get a very, very tough lesson in a concept known as nuclear latency.
So what in the world is nuclear latency? Well, think of it like this. It's having all the ingredients and the recipe book to bake a very, very dangerous cake, even if someone just smashed up your kitchen. It's all about the technical ability, the know-how, the blueprints, having the right people on speed dial to build a weapon super fast, even if you don't have an active, official weapons program running at that very moment.
Yeah, to put it even more simply, Iran may have lost the factory, but they still have the blueprint, and maybe, most importantly, they still have the engineers. The people who know exactly how to rebuild it and maybe do it faster and sneakier the next time around. They held on to that ability to break out, to build a weapon in just weeks or months. And that latent threat, that's what changed the entire game.
Okay, so while everyone's obsessing over Iran's breakout time, another major player in the region was watching all of this unfold. And they weren't just watching. They were taking notes, and they were writing a totally new playbook. Saudi Arabia saw what happened in that 12-day war, and they drew some really stark conclusions, which led to one heck of a dramatic ultimatum.
And let's be clear, this wasn't some subtle, behind-the-scenes diplomatic whisper. Nope. This was a loud, public declaration from the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. The message couldn't have been clearer. The old rules are out the window. If Iran gets a nuclear bomb, Saudi Arabia is getting one too, period. The kingdom was basically shouting from the rooftops that it would not be the only major power in the neighborhood left without that ultimate weapon.
So you gotta ask, why the super aggressive stance all of a sudden? Well, Riyadh's new strategy basically boiled down to 3 huge lessons they learned from that war. First off, they realized that Iran's bomb-in-the-basement status, that whole nuclear latency thing, it wasn't a shield. It might have actually provoked the attack. Second, they saw how Washington kind of hesitated before jumping in, and they decided, okay, we can't fully count on American protection. And third, when Iran fired that missile at the U.S. base in Qatar, it was a wake-up call. It proved Tehran was perfectly willing to drag the Gulf states into the line of fire. So for Riyadh, the answer was obvious. We have to be able to defend ourselves.
And this new mindset of we gotta look out for ourselves, it led to one of the biggest diplomatic shakeups we've seen in a long time. Armed with these tough new lessons, Saudi Arabia went to the United States not with their hand out, but as a real power player, ready to completely rewrite the rules of the game.
This right here is where everything just gets turned on its head. Okay, so before the war, the deal on the table was this kind of grand bargain, right? The U.S. offers a security pact and fancy nuclear tech, and in return, Saudi Arabia normalizes its relationship with Israel. But after the war, MBS just completely flipped the script. He basically argued that with Iran as this latent nuclear threat, that U.S. security pact wasn't some prize to be won anymore, it was an absolute necessity. And he pulled it off. He unlinked the whole deal from normalization with Israel. He got everything he wanted. without having to play his biggest diplomatic card.
So what did this new partnership, this deal that was basically forged in the fires of that 12-day war, what did it actually include? Well, in late 2025, the Trump administration and the Saudis announced this huge new agreement that was set to completely change the security landscape of the region.
I mean, the list of what Saudi Arabia got out of this is just wow. First, a formal U.S. defense pact. That's a huge deal, basically a promise that America has their back if they're attacked. Then, a deep partnership on critical minerals, stuff you need for all modern tech and defense. They also got the official U.S. stamp of approval for their massive civil nuclear energy plants. And get this, the U.S. Department of War, as it's now called, even agreed to finance almost half of a new Saudi rare earths refinery. It was, without a doubt, a massive, massive win for the kingdom.
But beyond all the headlines about defense pacts and rare earth minerals, there was this one little detail tucked away in the deal, one concession, and this one sent absolute shockwaves through the arms control world. You could call it the secret ingredient that made the whole thing work, and it was also, by far, the riskiest part.
And here it is. For the first time ever, with a new partner in the region, the United States agreed to let Saudi Arabia enrich uranium on its own soil. Now, this is the critical step. It's the part of the process that lets you create fuel for a peaceful nuclear power plant or the material for a nuclear bomb.
As you can imagine, the backlash in Washington was instant, and it was intense. Senator Edward Markey really summed up what a lot of people were fearing, calling the whole thing a recipe for disaster. His argument was pretty straightforward. Why would you give a country whose leader has already said he'll build a bomb the exact technology to do it and without the absolute tightest safeguards in place? It just seemed incredibly reckless.
So, in trying to solve one problem, it seems like they may have created an even bigger one. It's like the whole nuclear map of the Middle East was being redrawn right before our eyes, and the new version looked a lot more crowded and a whole lot more dangerous.
And here's the crazy irony in all of this. A military strike designed to stop a country from getting nuclear weapons seems to have kicked off a chain reaction that puts another major country on that very same path. So the Iran problem didn't exactly vanish, and now the world has a brand new Saudi problem to worry about too.
And believe me, the dominoes are already starting to tip over. Right after this U.S. deal went through, Saudi Arabia signed its own defense pact with Pakistan, which, already has nuclear weapons. And then came the real bombshell. Pakistan's defense minister comes out and says their nuclear program will be made available to Saudi Arabia if they need it. We're not just talking about enriching uranium anymore. This raises the possibility of them just getting a ready-made nuclear arsenal, basically creating a second nuclear power in the Middle East almost overnight.
Which brings us to right now, early 2026, staring at some pretty terrifying questions. In a desperate race to stop Iran from getting a bomb, did the world accidentally guarantee that Saudi Arabia would get one instead? Did the effort to prevent one nuclear state just pave the road for two? And in a region as on edge as this one, you have to wonder, who's next?